Connie's Chronicles is a documentary-style exploration of one Yorkshire family's hidden history. It's a journey uncovered through dusty historical archives, century-old census records, whispered family memories, and sudden, unexpected DNA discoveries.
Yeah, it actively pulls you in.
I want you to picture the rural East Riding of Yorkshire, right in the middle of the 19th century.
Oh, it's quite a specific landscape to imagine, isn't it?
It really is. Like, try to visualize these incredibly narrow village lanes. They're totally slick with winter frost.
Right, and the air is just biting cold.
Exactly. You step outside, and you immediately smell that damp earth mixed with wood smoke from the cottage chimneys. And across this very flat, pale, chalky landscape, you can just hear the distant ringing of church bells.
It sounds almost romantic when you describe it like that.
It does, right? But the reality was anything but. For the working class living there in the 1850s, life was an absolute machine.
Yeah, a machine that ran entirely on human exhaustion. I mean, the rhythm of your whole existence was completely dictated by the harvest.
Dawn to dusk labor, every single day.
Exactly. And the social pressures were just immense. You know, you had these incredibly rigid class boundaries that you were basically born into and you were expected to die in.
Which is exactly why we're opening up the family archive today. So welcome to this special installment of Connie's Chronicles.
It's a really incredible story we have today.
It is, because today we're not just looking at old dates and names. We are piecing together a deeply human story of survival, of devotion, and of a really profound legacy.
We're basically trying to reconstruct the love story of Robert Frankish and Amelia Bowser.
Yes. We are pushing past that dry, faded ink on the census returns to try and understand their emotional bond. Because, you know, this was a relationship that quietly served as the absolute bedrock for an entire family line.
And it ended up profoundly shaping the life of a young girl named Ethel, decades later.
It did. And, you know, I always approach these historical records like a constellation of stars.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, because, well, to the naked eye, it's really just scattered data points, right? An occupation logged here, a marriage register there.
Just random dots in the dark.
Exactly. But when you draw the lines between them, this really beautiful moving picture emerges.
And what's so fascinating here is that the records we are looking at, you know, decades of agricultural labor logs and these quiet domestic shifts, they might seem incredibly mundane at first glance.
Oh, totally. Just bureaucratic paperwork.
Right. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, they map out this profound emotional architecture. I mean, we are literally watching a couple build a fortress of family loyalty.
A fortress they built out of practically nothing. But to understand the strength of the bond that Robert and Amelia eventually forged, we first have to understand the world they were born into.
Yeah, that hard, unyielding reality of rural Yorkshire.
Right, so let's start by introducing Amelia. As we look at the archive, Amelia Bowser was born in 1835.
In Killam, right.
Yes, in Killam, Yorkshire.
Yeah.
Now, her parents were William Bowser, who was born in 1786, and Elizabeth Shaw, born in 1791.
Wait, 1786 and 1791?
Yeah.
So when Amelia was born in 1835, her father was, what, 49?
49. And her mother was 44.
Wow. Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because that is not typical for the 1830s working class.
Not at all.
Yeah.
History usually paints this era as one where life expectancy was incredibly low, especially for farm workers.
Right. I mean, the physical toll of that life usually broke people long before they hit 50. Disease, malnutrition, accidents on the farm.
So for her parents to still be having children at 49 and 44, that implies a really serious level of resilience.
It absolutely does. They were survivors. And being raised by older parents like that, Amelia probably didn't have a very sheltered or naive childhood.
No, I imagine she was raised with a very strong sense of duty, like an intense maturity from a very young age. Her parents would have known exactly how fragile their survival was.
Exactly. And that pragmatism would have been passed right down to her, which makes her eventual match with Robert so interesting.
Right, because Robert Frankish comes from an almost identical situation. He was born 5 years before Amelia in 1830.
In a village called Beeford, correct?
Yes, Before, Yorkshire. And his parents, Thompson Frankish and Mary Burrell, well, get this. When Robert was born, his father was 50 and his mother was 43.
No way. So they both had older, incredibly resilient parents.
Exactly. They were both the children of survivors. So they probably shared this really fundamental, unspoken understanding of what it took just to stay alive.
That shared psychological baseline is so important. But Beaufort and Killam, they are close-knit communities, but they're still distinct villages.
Right.
So in the 1850s, when nobody had a car and you basically never traveled further than you could walk, how do these two actually meet?
That is the big question, and it comes down to the hiring fairs. The agricultural economy relied on these massive gatherings where young farm workers would go to find employment for the year.
Oh, like the Martin Muss fairs.
Yes, exactly. In November, after the harvest, you'd have all these young men and women from neighboring parishes flooding into central market towns.
So it was basically the 1 week of the year they weren't completely isolated on their respective farms.
Exactly. It was a labor market, but it was also a massive social event.
Mm-hmm.
There were alehouses, stalls selling ribbons, people mingling. It was the one place where a young man from Beaufort and a young woman from Killam would actually cross paths.
And start a courtship, which leads us to their wedding day.
Right. December 4th, 1855. They get married in Killam.
A winter wedding.
Yeah, but, we hear winter wedding and think of something really picturesque and cozy.
Mm-hmm.
But for them, it was pure logistical necessity.
Because of the agricultural calendar, right?
Yes. The harvest was over, winter was setting in. It was literally the only time of year a farm worker would have a few days off and maybe a tiny bit of cash saved up from their yearly wages.
So they get married when the system finally gives them a momentary break.
Exactly. But I want to push back on something here. History often paints women of this era just as, wives, like they were purely passive participants in this agricultural economy.
Oh, absolutely. They just faded to the background of the records.
Right. But what does the archives suggest about Amelia's identity?
Right.
Because she definitely doesn't fade into the background.
No, she doesn't. And this is where we see that pragmatism she learned from her parents shining through. In the census listings, Amelia is recorded with a specific profession. She's listed as a tailor.
A tailor. And we're not talking about casually using a modern sewing machine here.
Oh, definitely not. This is 1855. A sewing machine would have been an astronomical expense for a farm laborer's wife. This is entirely done by hand.
Which means calloused fingers working by the light of a tiny candle or an oil lamp at night.
And probably working with really heavy, stiff fabrics, wool, canvas, corduroy, the kind of stuff farm workers wore.
It's backbreaking work. But it means she wasn't just managing the household. She had a highly skilled trade.
She was bringing in independent income. Even early on, she was a woman of serious industry.
It's an incredible partnership. They are combining forces just to fight for basic stability. And we see that fight play out over the next few decades.
The rhythm of the soil, basically.
Yeah. We track them through the census records, 1861, 1871, 1881, and 1891. And for all those decades, they are consistently found living in Ulrome, Yorkshire.
And Robert's profession during all that time.
Unchanging. Year after year, he is listed as an ag lab, an agricultural laborer, or sometimes farm lab.
40 straight years of agricultural labor. I mean, we really need to emphasize the immense physical toll of that.
Oh, it's staggering to even think about.
It is. We're talking about 12 to 14 hours a day out in the harsh Yorkshire weather, digging ditches by hand, threshing wheat, walking miles behind a heavy horse-drawn plow.
And doing it all on a diet of mostly bread and potatoes.
Right. His body must have been just wrecked by his 40s, the joint pain, the exhaustion. And meanwhile, Amelia is facing her own domestic marathon.
Hauling water, cooking from scratch, mending clothes, and keeping up her tailoring business just to keep them afloat. They eventually move into a place called Eastgate Cottage in Ulrome.
Which brings us to the most shocking document in their entire archive.
Yes, the 1868 poll book.
Because if you look at the trajectory of a typical ag lab in the 19th century, it's a straight line from poverty to the workhouse. But in 1868, Robert and Amelia deviate from that path in a massive way.
They really do. In this poll book, they are listed as living in a cottage with gardens in a place called Harpham.
But it's not just a cottage.
No. The record explicitly states it is a freehold property.
Freehold. That is, we need to explain just how monumental that is for our listeners.
Please do, because it blew my mind when I read it.
In that society, almost all land was hoarded by wealthy aristocrats or large estate owners. Most farm workers lived in tied cottages.
Right, meaning the house was tied to your job.
Exactly. Your employer owned your house. If you got sick or if you argued about your wages, you weren't just fired, you were evicted immediately. You had zero security.
But a freehold property means they owned it outright.
Yes. No farmer could kick them out. It belonged to Robert and Amelia.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Buying a freehold property on a 19th century farm laborer's wage is basically impossible.
The math does not add up at all.
It's like someone today buying a house in a major city purely on tips from a part-time job. It requires an almost unthinkable level of sacrifice.
And teamwork. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this freehold cottage in Harpham isn't just real estate.
What is it then?
It's a monument to Robert and Amelia's partnership. It proves they were incredibly disciplined. They must have pooled whatever extra income they had, which almost certainly came from Amelia's tailoring skills, to carve out this tiny piece of the world that belonged entirely to them.
They quite literally sewed their way out of total dependency on the landowners. It's beautiful. It shows such fierce determination to protect each other.
But sadly, the physical sanctuary they built couldn't protect them from the harsh medical realities of the era.
No, it couldn't. And this is where the story pivots from this hard-won stability into a really heartbreaking crisis.
The shadow of 1900.
Yeah. In the year 1900, Amelia suffers a severe stroke.
She would have been about 65 years old.
65. And a severe stroke today is terrifying. But with modern medicine, we have emergency interventions, physical therapy.
In 1900, there was virtually nothing. Bed rest. That was it.
And the aftermath of a severe stroke usually means paralysis, inability to speak, inability to care for yourself at all. She would have needed constant, round-the-clock nursing care.
Which Robert simply could not provide.
Right. Robert is nearly 70 years old at this point, but he's still working as an agricultural laborer. Because if he stops working, they have no food. There were no pensions yet.
So he can't stay by her bedside?
No. And so they're forced to make a devastating choice. To get the care she needs, Amelia has to leave Robert.
After 45 continuous years of marriage.
45 years of fighting side by side, and she has to relocate to Bridlington.
To live with her niece, right.
Yes. The 1901 census data reveals the reality of this separation. In Bridlington, the head of the household is listed as Annie Frankish.
And Annie is 47 years old.
Yes, and her occupation is listed as a charwoman.
A charwoman. So she's doing the heaviest, most grueling kind of domestic cleaning for other people just to survive herself.
Scrubbing floors, hauling coal, washing heavy laundry, and yet she takes in her incapacitated aunt to tend to her. Amelia is 66 by the time of the census, living with Annie.
This really highlights the vital historical role of extended family networks.
How do you mean?
Well, before the welfare state, before the NHS, nieces and unmarried female relatives were essentially the only social safety net the working class had. If Annie hadn't taken Amelia in, the only other option was the workhouse infirmary.
Which was a terrifying prospect.
It was designed to be punitive, so Annie shielded her from that. But there's something so poignant in that 1901 Bridlington census entry for Amelia.
Oh, the profession column.
Yes. Even paralyzed, living away from her husband, the enumerator has written down her profession as tailor.
Or Tailor M for maker. She refused to lose that identity. She was still a woman of skill.
It's a tiny act of defiance in the ink. But what is Robert doing during all this?
Well, back in Ulrome, Robert is 68. The 1901 census lists him, heartbreakingly, still as a laborer on farm. He is still out in the fields.
But he isn't alone in the cottage, is he?
He's not. Living with him is a 10-year-old girl named Ethel. She is listed as his niece, technically his niece by marriage.
Now wait, so what does this all mean? We see Robert, nearly 70, brokenhearted, taking in a 10-year-old girl while his wife is miles away. Isn't it incredibly unusual for an elderly working man to become the primary guardian of a young girl in 1901?
It is extremely unusual, and it raises an important question about the emotional ecosystem of this family.
Why did he do it?
Because Ethel wasn't just any niece. Her mother was a woman named Amelia Noddle.
Amelia.
Yes, the family lore, the real heart of the archive, tells us that Ethel's mother, Amelia Noddle, was specifically named in honor of Amelia Bowser Frankish.
Oh, wow, so she was named after Robert's wife.
Yes, so when little Ethel needs a home, Robert taking her in isn't just an obligation, it is an act of profound love.
It's like a proxy devotion to his ailing wife.
Exactly. He couldn't physically nurse his own Amelia in Bridlington, but he could protect the child of the woman named after the love of his life. He was guarding that namesake.
That is just... It's incredibly moving. It shows that their love wasn't just contained to the two of them. It radiated out to protect the most vulnerable members of their family.
And it sets the stage for the final years of their lives, where we really see the echoes of that loyalty.
The seeds they planted decades earlier finally blossom.
Yes. So we jump forward to 1909. In January of 1909, Amelia passes away at the age of 74.
But the location of her death is the important part here.
It's the most important part. She died in Ulrome.
She made it back.
She made it back. Somehow, after years of separation and illness, she was brought back home to Robert.
They didn't die apart.
No, they didn't. She made it back to the village where they had spent so much of their lives together. But after she passes, Robert is left alone. He's a widower.
Which brings us to the remarkable 1911 census.
I still can barely comprehend this document. In 1911, Robert Frankish is 80 years old.
80.
And under his occupation, it astoundingly still says, laborer general on farm.
At 80 years old, the physical fortitude required to do that, it's unimaginable.
It's beyond human. But the real revelation in 1911 isn't just that he's still working, it's his household structure.
Right, he isn't living alone in a cold, empty cottage.
No, he is living in a 3-room dwelling with a 24-year-old wagoner named Henry Milner Hughes.
And Henry's wife.
Ethel Hughes, who is 21 years old.
Wait, Ethel Hughes? That's Ethel Nodal.
Yes. It's the exact same Ethel Nodal that Robert took in a decade earlier.
Oh my goodness, so she grew up.
She grew up, she got married to Henry, and they have a 1-year-old daughter named Elsie. And they're all living together.
That is the most beautiful cyclical nature of care. The 10-year-old girl that Robert sheltered during his darkest hour when he was separated from his wife has grown up.
And instead of letting her elderly 80-year-old uncle go to the workhouse, she integrates him into her brand new family to care for him.
She became his shield, just like he was hers.
It's like planting a tree so that someone else can enjoy the shade. But in this case, the tree Robert and Amelia planted bent back down to shelter Robert in his final winter.
That perfectly synthesizes their legacy. I mean, the survival of this family wasn't about wealth. It wasn't about titles or vast inheritances.
No, they were farm laborers. They had nothing.
But they had this fiercely tight-knit loyalty. Amelia and Robert didn't leave behind a fortune, but they left behind a culture of unconditional care.
And that culture entirely defined Ethel's life and the generations that followed. Robert finally passes away in July 1915 at the age of 85. He was buried on July 17th.
Surviving to 85 after a lifetime of hard agricultural labor, he really was held together by pure willpower and the love of his family.
Absolutely. So as we gently bring ourselves out of the historical narrative, I just want to summarize this extraordinary arc.
It really is an epic in its own quiet way.
It is. From a freezing winter wedding in Killam in 1855, through 40 years of back-breaking, exhausting labor just to secure that miraculous Harpham freehold cottage.
Through the absolute tragedy of Amelia's stroke in 1900.
Yes, and the agonizing separation that followed. All the way to a legacy of deep, protective love embodied by a young woman named Ethel.
It shows you that the most powerful forces in history aren't always recorded in textbooks. Sometimes they are recorded in the margins of a census.
Exactly. And so I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought today. Think about your own family history.
Think about the unrecorded sacrifices.
Yes, the sacrifices made by people whose names you might not even know. How many of the comforts you have today, the values you hold, or even the names you carry, are the direct result of a quiet, unseen loyalty between two people over a century ago. People who just refuse to give up on each other.
It's definitely something to reflect on.
Thank you for listening to Connie's Chronicles, where love, memory, and history walk hand in hand. You've been listening to Connie's Chronicles, preserving the past, connecting the future.